All right, what is up, Utes fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest. Good to be here with you guys. Sorry about the camera tonight. I just got my new computer and just got the setup done, so I'm still figuring all that out. So sorry if the video's not the greatest in the world. I do have Larry just chimed in. Go Utes, Larry. Good to have you here. I do have an exciting surprise for you guys. I'm going to bring him in now. This is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Pac-12. What is up, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you all and having the opportunity to come here and talk to the Utes fans. It's great. I'm sure some of you, or at least I hope some of you, see me on Locked On Pac-12 before. Talk about Utah not infrequently over there. But yeah, great to be with you and ready to get this thing rocking and rolling.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah, and I know I'm familiar with your channel. That's how I knew about you. And I think, Spencer, you guys should really enjoy his content tonight. He knows a lot about the Pac 12, a lot about the conference realignment. Look, Larry just chimed in, says, watch Spence all the time. P. Dot says, I've seen you on there. Well, very good.
Love it.
It sounds like you
Love it,
guys,
guys.
if you
Thank you.
appreciate the guest. So that's awesome. Well, Spencer, so and where can people find you on Twitter and stuff like that? If you just want to tell them before we dive in.
Yeah, at Smalls_55 is my personal handle, and then I'm also the nameless, faceless guy behind at Locked On Ducks and at LO_Pac-12 because I host both those shows for the Locked On Network. But I'm sure Utes fans would be probably a little bit more akin to the Locked On Pac-12. But you hit me up either on either spot, at me, DM me, whatever. It's all wide open. Always happy to chat about anything. Whether you just want to say that you enjoy the show or that you think I'm an idiot, like you do whatever you want, man. You say what you like.
Well, like I said, Spencer, excited to have you here, and it seems like a lot of the viewers already know who you are. So let's go ahead and dive in. I thought it would be a really fun exercise. As you guys come into the video, please make sure you like the video. If you guys are big time Utes fans, Pac-12 fans, please subscribe to the video and jump into the chat. We're gonna have a lot of fun tonight, and hopefully we can get you guys to ask Spencer some questions. But Spencer, I thought a really fun exercise to get us started here would be talking about all the different Pac-12 teams. So, and before we do that, though, I mean, where do you think we are in conference realignment? I think I saw a video from you a while back saying it feels like the Pac-12's done. I feel like it still is turning that direction, but it definitely doesn't feel as immediate as it did before. I just kind of wanted to see where you're standing right now.
I think the biggest thing to look at right now, since the Pac-12 and Big 12 talks were discontinued, that was initiated by the Big 12, the cancellation of the talks. I mean, like they were having discussions about a potential merger. Big 12 ultimately decided they were not going to do a full merger there, and so they might still look to poach some Pac-12 schools, but that's still something we're following on a daily basis. But the biggest thing to keep in mind here is timeline, because I think a lot of people are, rightfully, and I'm in this boat as well, wondering like when's the next piece of news going to drop, because everything happens so fast, right? I mean, the story broke that the story broke that USC and UCLA were also glad to see that I'm welcome here. I'd hope I would be after Utah smacked the Ducks twice in like 3 weeks last year. So there can't be too much animus there, right?
Yeah, it was
But
probably a
so
really fun 3 weeks for us, and not as fun on your
I've
end.
had better. I've let's
Yeah,
just say I've had better.
yes, sir.
I was in Vegas and I was going to get a drink before halftime, and let me tell you, I don't drink very often, but that was the day. So back to what I was saying. The timeline is just kind of weird because initially everything was so fast. It was a story. USC and UCLA are announcing they're going to leave the Big Ten, and then by the next day, they had voted to approve it, and the Big Ten had accepted them. That was really fast, and I think that set a tone for conference realignment of, oh, everything has to be fast. You got to go right now. You got to do it. You got to be on top of it. And in some sense, that was true. But now the stuff has settled down a little bit, and we have a clearer picture of who's going where and who's not going where, more importantly. I think the timeline you're looking at here for whether or not we'll be able to talk about playing in the Pac-12 conference in a couple years is probably a little bit sooner than a year from now. because to make a realignment happen for any school, there are a lot of logistical and legal situations that have to be worked out. Like it's a chore for a lot of people at a school. And so I think you need at least a year to either get teams into your conference or merge with another conference, or for your team to move to a different conference. So I think at the latest you would see like early summer next year, the Pac-12, if it's able to stick together, announce that, they're adding San Diego State and Boise State, or San Diego State and UNLV, or this, like whatever it would be. I think there's a pretty solid consensus that I agree with, that San Diego State would be the number one most logical team to add, both because of their prowess and because of their media market down there in San Diego. Like, you got to get back into that SoCal market a little. You could make an argument for who the next team would be, but if you were to remain the Pac-12 or maybe go to the Pac-14 with other Mountain West programs, I think the timeline for that at the latest would be like late June, early July of next year. But don't be surprised if this stuff kind of quiets down for not just the next several weeks, but maybe even a few months, to the point where we get going in the season and you can kind of forget about it. Not, you can't entirely forget about it, of course, because it'll constantly get mentioned, but it won't be as big of a news story or discussion point for shows like yours or the ones that I host as it has been for the last couple weeks. I think that could happen where you have a couple months of quietness and then it starts to pick up. And then once the season ends, maybe those talks become more and more aggressive. But if the Pac-12 is going to make a move to keep it alive, I don't think they can announce anything later than like maybe end of June next year. I think that's like the absolute latest. And in a perfect world, if you're George Kliavkoff, it would be able to come before then.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a lot. That was awesome.
Yeah, I have a tendency to do that. So if I ever need to shut up, just cut me off.
No, you're good. That's why I brought you on, so I don't have to talk so much.
The unwritten rule of hosting a show: you bring a guest on so that you don't have to do as much work.
That's true. But I also thought people would be excited to see it. That though, so Spencer, you brought up like the Pac-12 bringing on people and more teams heading out. If you were gonna, rub your crystal ball, kind of see what happens in the next year or two, would you guess that we see some teams leave the Pac-12, some more teams leave, and that it grows slightly, or what would you say you feel like we're heading to at this point?
It's very early in the prediction phase, because there have been so many different rumors and so much speculation about what could happen next and where teams would go. To me, the most likely option is that you will have more schools at least attempt to leave the Pac-12. Whether or not it'll be successful, that's a different matter because a number of things go into that. But here's the other thing for our beloved Conference of Champions here. Say of the 6 schools that are rumored to be going to the Big 12, or the Big 12 might try and poach, which is Utah, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and the Arizona schools. What if only 2 of them leave? What if 4 of them leave? But let's say it's only 2. I'm not going to guess which 2 because I'm not privy to enough details to be able to make an informed prediction or hypothesis about what could take place there. But let's say it's 2. If you're the Pac-12 and you have 8 member schools, number one, it used to be the Pac-8. You can't be the Pac-8 in today's college football landscape, but let's say you have 8 schools to work with. Then you would go, and instead of adding maybe 2 Mountain West schools, you might add 4. And I think that's a scenario that not a lot of people have discussed because, the reports that come out from legitimate reporters or news outlets are all like, the Big 12 is in talks with these 6 schools. Well, what if they come back and decide they only want it to be 4? Could you then replace those 4, right? And then you'd be down 6, but you could go back to being the Pac-10, and then you might not be seen as a Power 5 conference anymore. But is that something that could take place? The most likely option is that more teams will end up leaving the Pac-12. The biggest question is how many, because if you were to have all 6 leave, conference is done, right? And I know a lot of people already hold that opinion. I don't. Because if you are George Kliavkoff and you're able to convince all the 10 remaining schools to stay, you have a viable conference. Is it a perfect conference? No. Is it viable? Yes. Like you can be a conference that is at least semi-legitimate on a national level if you are the current Pac-10 schools remaining and you add San Diego State and UNLV. You'd be tapping into some decently sized media markets. San Diego State's been pretty darn good at football for the last decade or so in the Mountain West. They beat Utah a year ago in that amazing 3 overtime game that I'm sure is making a lot of Utes fans want me to just log off the show right now for bringing it up. But I think it's at least something, right? And we're always talking about this football first because it is football first. But think about it from a basketball standpoint. San Diego State's been to the tournament before. Malachi Flynn was a baller. I like that's a name that people legitimately know. And so would you be as strong if you lost 2 or, even without USC and UCLA? No, you wouldn't be as strong as you were before. But anyone who's saying like that's the only path forward, that's not, I don't agree with that conclusion. And I've had some people throw that idea at me like, oh, you lost USC and UCLA, you're done. I'm like, well, from a football standpoint, I don't think that's really true. You're going to be weaker without USC and UCLA. I'm not denying that. You're going to get less TV money because you don't have the LA market. I'm not denying that either. But go look at the last decade or so of UCLA football in particular, but USC as well. It's been a lot of up and down. It has not been, neither has been a consistent powerhouse flagship program for the Pac-12 on the football field when it comes to consistently winning at a high level. They've had good seasons individually, but they haven't sustained it. And so the idea that you can't survive at all with a Pac-10 that's got 2 Mountain West schools in it, is it suboptimal to what George Kliavkoff would like to have? Yeah, of course. But you're not going to get back to what you had before. But as long as you can do something that's at least semi-respectable, then I think you could remain as a conference. But that all depends on whether or not Kliavkoff can convince the 10 remaining schools. And I don't think he'd have a hard time convincing 4 of them, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State. I think they would stay in a heartbeat, and they want it to stay together because they'd be in a really bad spot should the conference break up. But if he's able to convince all those other 6 that this is the best place for them to be, and he's undergoing media rights negotiation deals, I have no idea how that's going right now. I don't even know how he's doing that. I literally have no idea. It's like a chicken and the egg problem. It's like, yeah, I'm going to convince these schools to stay with a good media rights deal, and I have to get a good media rights deal by convincing these schools to stay. Like, that's an impossible situation.
Yeah, it sounds like it must. Imagine having to be him in those conversations.
Oh gosh, he's got a terrible job right now. I feel so bad for the guy. This is not his mess. He didn't do any of this. Is not his particular fault. I think what he has done so far as the conference's commissioner has been good. It hasn't been a ton, but that's okay. And I think the first major test of his pedigree as a conference commissioner is certainly being tested to the fullest extent right now with this realignment situation. But I think it was going to, I think it was going to be, the big test was going to be the media rights deal and what he could get compared to the deal that Larry Scott got, which, as we know, really, really sucks. Yeah. This is predominantly Larry Scott's mess he's trying to clean up. And it's like trying to plug a water hose with a rock the size of your hand. Like, that's just not an easy thing to do.
So Larry dropped in and said, hit the like button. Make sure you guys, as you come into the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're a Pac-12 fan, Utes fan, and also comment in the chat. I'll try to get as many questions to Spencer as we can while he's here. Larry asked, are the rumors about the unequal revenue sharing true? Obviously, I doubt if they're true, but I would love to just kind of get your opinion on that. For me, I think the Pac-12 specifically is definitely, or the new Pac-10, however you want to look at it. It feels like one of those conferences that really has a high end and a middle to low end. For me, I can't imagine how an Oregon or a Washington or even a Utah, to a certain extent, would want to split equal revenue with some of the other teams in the conference. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the unequal revenue sharing thing, I'm not privy to all the information that I think Larry is asking about here, but broadly speaking, on the conferences giving an equal amount of money to the schools, even though it's very clear that not everybody brings in the same amount of revenue. I think that to do an unequal revenue sharing model is not logical from a conference standpoint, because what else is your job as a conference, right? Like if you're George Kliavkoff, or previously you're Larry Scott, or you're anyone who's in that office, and you're looking at what is your overall mission as a conference? It is to promote the strongest number of teams possible to give them the best chance to succeed. And so if you give revenue base, and I understand the argument for it, right? I totally get the arguments of like, well, they bring in more money, so they should get more money. I get that, but that's not acting in the conference's best interests. That's operating in a specific school's best interest. But the conference has to look at it as a whole. They want to give everybody the best chance they can to succeed, so that you can have better teams, win more games, play in, beat other teams or other conferences' teams, get to a college football playoff, NCAA tournament, right? You want to have all of that sort of stuff going on from a conference point of view. And so for anyone out there saying like, well, they shouldn't do equal revenue sharing, that's the best way for the conference to do it, to try to promote as much competitive balance as you can, which is what your overall objective is, right? I mean, if you're talking about how much money you give to each football program in the Pac-12's world, you would have 6 schools in the top 25 at the end of every year. And this past year, it had 2. It had 2. That's not good. You'd like to have 6, but from the conference's standpoint, what's the best way to do that? It's to do the equal revenue sharing, not to allow it to striate away based on how the money comes in, because you already have a gap between the amount of money available at USC versus Oregon State, right? That gap already exists because USC is going to have more wealthy donors for their program. They'll be better at fundraising. They'll get more TV games, so they'll bring in that money's getting redistributed. So bad example there, but like they're getting more money from the ticket sales at the gate. Advertisers are probably willing to pay more. Like there's already a gap there. So if you're the Pac-12 trying to promote the strongest number of teams possible, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have that unequal distribution of revenue. And I think that's why you see every conference do that, because you also, want to incentivize people to stay in your conference, right? And no one's going to want to join your conference. And the Pac-12 expansion has undoubtedly been good for the Conference of Champions over the last 11 years or so. But I don't know if Utah and Colorado would have come in if they were going to have to compete in a TV market deal directly with USC, Oregon, and Washington, right? That's not a fair fight. So you disincentivize the idea of other programs that can bring a lot to your conference coming in if you know that they're going to join and not get as much money as their peers.
No, I think that's a great take, and I'm not gonna like argue about it. But so one thing I thought of when it comes to like unequal revenue sharing. So I don't even look at it as much of a way to like hurt the smaller teams, right? Obviously, they wouldn't get the same amount, but like I'm just pulling it up here. So every Pac-12 school is getting like $42.6 million a year, right? And then I look up every Mountain West school is getting, $10 million a year, right? So imagine you go to an Oregon State and a Washington State, and you say, okay, cool, guys. So we are willing to give you $15 million a year. That is way more than the Mountain West is going to give you. You see what I'm saying? And obviously, you risk it being poached. But I would also say, just in the grand scheme of things, if other teams were to become available, right, you wanted to get aggressive and go pull someone from the Big 12, pull someone from the ACC, to me, it seems like that'd be a good way to do it. So you have more funds available, and you could give like your top teams, like in Oregon and Washington, especially in a situation like this, you can kind of incentivize them to stay. And when other teams become available, you would be a little more aggressive, be able to be more aggressive to go get them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a card you play there. I don't know the legality of it and whether or not the contracts are set up so that each school is legally required to get an equal share of the TV deal. But you also have to factor in that George Kliavkoff is renegotiating that deal right now,
Yeah.
so maybe he'd be able to make that change once the deal expires in 2024. Because it would be a pitch to a school of like, we can guarantee that you're going to get this much and we can do that. But then
Yeah.
you're making somebody else upset. And that's not always a great move as a commissioner either. So like you can, as a conference, I'm sure you've got plenty of ways to make enemies or, cause fans or administrations or athletic directors to become disgruntled. Doing it directly with money seems like an unnecessary way in my view, but I do, your point is well taken.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like if you're Oregon State or Washington State, and it's like, okay, like where you get to a point where it's like move to the Mountain West, like it's the only option to keep the Pac-12 together, right? It's like move to the Mountain West and get 10 million a year, or stay here, we give you 20 million a year, and we move a lot of those funds to Oregon. Like even though that sounds unfair from Oregon to Oregon State, it's like, okay, yeah, but now we're going to keep the Pac-10 together. Like,
Yeah,
we don't.
And I mean, that's priority number one for Kleofkoff, right? Is find a way to duct tape this thing together until you can find a more permanent solution or a more permanent pitch. And there are a number of different ways he could go in that front, but none of them are easy.
What do you think the longest media rights deal that's going to be offered to them is? Like, I feel like if you're bidding on this Pac-10 right now, you got to be like 5 years max. Like, you don't know, you have no idea where this is going to be in a few years. But what do you think about that?
I am not a contract expert, so I don't have a great frame of reference here. But what I will say is that the ACC's deal runs through 2036, and there is not a network alive that would give that deal that long to the Pac-12. Like I was saying earlier, man, that's just a complicated negotiation because you might be making the pitch as the Pac-10 if you're Kleofkoff. You might be making it as the Pac-12. But if you're going to go to a network and say, okay, we're going to be the Pac-12, they're going to say, well, who are those two schools going to be? And right now he has to say, I'll get back to you on that. But I promise that they'll be there.
They're going to be great.
And I don't think that's going to land well for a lot of network executives who are probably going to look and go, okay, so you're promising me something that you can't guarantee. Tough spot. That's a tough spot.
I would imagine that if you're Kleofkoff, you have unwritten, like you have handshake deals with a few of these teams, so that when you go to these negotiating tables, it's like these are the teams we have an agreement, and if you give us this deal, they are on board. Obviously, he can't go out and say that, but I'm sure he wouldn't have started these negotiations. And you got to think, like any of these teams, realistically, even though it's rocky now, they're jumping at the opportunity to come to the Pac-10. Like if you're, honestly, one thing I wanted to check you on a little, UNLV, I grew up in Las Vegas. UNLV has to be the worst football team.
They're so bad. Their head coach is Marcus Arroyo. I think he's still their head coach. I don't know why he shouldn't be. I don't know why he got hired in the first place. Oregon fans, I can tell you, we do not collectively have a high opinion of him because once Justin Herbert got away from Marcus Arroyo, he turned into a top 5 caliber quarterback in the NFL. And Arroyo and Cristobal had him there as, someone who people were discussing as like, oh, is he going to fall out of the first round? And then you watch him for like an hour with NFL coaching. You're like, oh, yeah, we underdrafted that guy.
No, I tell you what, do you follow PFF at all, like the grading and everything?
Yep.
So I always like really hold them to a high standard. Talk about a group of guys that were wrong about Justin Herbert. They made me not think Justin Herbert would be good in the NFL, and now it's like, wow, okay. Like I feel like he made me really buy into the whole raw tools thing. Like if they have the tools, go for it, and then good shot it works out because that guy.
Yeah, no, he is so awesome, and we as Oregon fans love rooting for him. Like he's a really, really good dude, and he's just such a great player. But we got on that topic by discussing Marcus Arroyo and UNLV. It took him a while to win his first game there, and it is not surprising that he is not finding success there at UNLV. The reason that if you were going to add 2 Mountain West schools to make it to Pac-12 again, be San Diego State and UNLV, because as you said, UNLV is in Las Vegas. which is not far from where I am at the moment, actually. And so I'd be semi okay with that if that meant that, Pac-12 games would be, not far from where I am right now. But I see your point there, because you have to try and recapture a media market, right? You got to get attention. It's not as if there aren't people in Las Vegas. It's a growing area. It's also a good place to recruit. There have been a number of good players coming out of that area. Bishop
Marco
Gorman's a really
Murray,
good high school.
Steven
Liberty High
Jackson.
School. Yeah, like
Yeah.
there are some good players down there. So it would make sense from that point of view. But gosh, they haven't been good in a while. They have been bad.
I
I
actually
mean,
brought it up the other day on the screen. I pulled it up. I don't, but when we went through it, like what was their record over the past 20 years?
it's not
They
good.
have, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and you guys in the chat can chime in if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. It was 2 winning seasons over the past 20 years. And those seasons are 6-6 and 7-5. This is a guy that, like, dude, I always used to, I was from Vegas. Like, this was a long time ago, but it's like I would be there and I'd be hoping UNLV would give me something to want to be a part of. But it was like just as bad as it
Nothing.
gets.
Yeah, and so here's the one redeeming quality for UNLV. It's not like other Mountain West schools where you would look at them and say, that's just kind of hopeless. They're never going to be good. There's no reason they couldn't be good. They're
I've been
like,
saying
they
that for a
just
long time.
haven't made. I don't know all of the details as to why they have been so terrible, but that is a place that just needs the right coach and could be a respectable Mountain West school. Nevada has been good before. Nevada, over the
Colin
years, we've
Kaepernick,
seen them crack the top 25 before. It has happened on several occasions. So Nevada, that's not even specifically in Las Vegas, has been a more well-run program.
If you can
than
recruit kids to Reno,
Yeah, you can recruit. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm not saying Nevada's been elite or incredible or anything like
they
that,
had a
but they've been
run. They had a little run.
yeah, but they've been a lot better than UNLV has. And so if that's the case, to me, UNLV just can't find the right coach, and they feel like someone who could be a coach away. But boy, that's got to be a culture setter, because
You got to come
that
in there with a
program.
jackhammer, dude. You got to
Yeah,
assault
you got to
rifle.
take a sledgehammer to it and knock it down.
This is
That's a
a
good
question I
question.
saw in the chat. Speaking of Mountain West teams, like you were saying, if they were to add 4 teams, who's the fourth? Boise, San Diego State, UNLV. Then who wouldn't you want to grab, a Big 12 team or another Group of 5? I would imagine that fourth school would be Fresno State, just from everything I hear. I just wanted to get your opinion on who that might be.
Yeah, I think SDSU, Boise, and UNLV make the most sense. Utah State could be an option. Nevada, like we were just discussing, that could be an option. I don't think they would go down to the FCS level and look at like a Montana or Montana State to make the jump up. That would probably not be in their best interest, though Montana would be the most likely of the group. I don't see that being the case. Fresno State is certainly an option in there. I think they'd probably be the most logical one because they're in the state of California. But if you went with Utah State or Nevada, I could, maybe get behind one of those reasons as well. The second part of your question, when you want to grab a Big 12 team or another Group of 5 conference school, well, yeah, the Pac-12 would love to be able to add a Big 12 team, but that's not going to happen. Like that would be like sunshine and roses, baby. Like they would be, woo, that feels good. If a Big 12 team left the conference to come to the Pac-12, I can't foresee that happening with anyone. You could look at another Group of 5 school. If that were to be the case, you would probably just pick 2 of those Mountain West and then look at maybe like, I don't know, maybe SMU in the state of Texas, try to get over there.
I heard
And
some people mention SMU. That honestly,
yeah, like that's the most
that sounds
respectable
awesome.
one. That's
That
the
sounds
most
awesome.
respectable one that's left because, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and BYU, who of course would have been a logical candidate as well, are all going to the Big 12. So those options are taken out. I think, DJ and Tay, that's why you haven't seen those Group of 5 names get thrown out there very often, because there just aren't that many good ones. But if I don't think SMU would be willing to, be the lone school from the state of Texas, Like that's the difficult thing about it. Like arguably from a media market and program pedigree standpoint, your best option could be, if you're going to add 4, those 3: Boise, SDSU, UNLV, and SMU. I think you got a very legitimate case there. The problem is we've seen these teams get linked together in pairs for a reason. You've got to have a travel partner, and being geographically isolated to that extent is not something that most schools are going to get behind. Utah and Colorado right next to each other, but that's about as far apart as, teams that are moving in pairs are going to go. So I can't see that happening. If you could find another Texas school, yeah, that'd be good. But at that point, you might be looking at the FCS level to make the jump up. And Sam Houston State is already moving to Conference USA, and I don't think that's a viable option at this point in time either. So I'm sure they'd love to grab a Big 12 or another Group of 5 school, but because the Big 12 has gone on and rated the American Conference, which has kind of been the best Group of 5 over the last several years and will be for the next couple, I think your options are slim on that front.
No, absolutely. Your options are very slim when you look at the Group of 5. And like you said, obviously you'd want to grab a Big 12 team, but why would you leave the Big 12 right now for the Pac-10? I mean, it would just be a stupid decision. Financially, you're probably better in the Big 12 right now. Long-term outlook, you're probably better in the Big 12 right now. Just overall, it's the spot to be. Hopefully, we can lock down some sort of media rights agreement, and then I don't know, it'd be tough. We both talked about earlier, we're not contract experts, so it'd be tough to add more after that. But if you guys are enjoying the video, please do like the video. It gets it out to more Utes fans, more Pac-12 fans. It means the world. And with that, I got another question that I saw in the chat. Who was it? Let me see. Oh, Eris. Obviously, this is kind of Monday morning quarterback, right? But anyone think the Pac-12 should have raided the Big 12 when Texas and OU decided to leave? I can only imagine how the Pac-10 must feel right now, like the opportunity they had to go grab teams from the Big 10, and now it just, bottomed out on them. I'm sure they also feel the same way about BYU. I work in Orem, which is right outside of Provo, and that's like might as well be Provo, and I can tell you that's a hardcore fan base. Any thoughts on this?
Going back to George Kliavkoff having to clean up Larry Scott's mess, hindsight's definitely 2020 here, and I think that definitely would have been the play. I also want to credit Bob in the comments. He made a good point about Group of 5 teams in the state of Texas. UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio, could be. So UTSA and SMU, I haven't thrown those out before, but that could be an interesting pairing just to keep your eye on. So that was a good idea, Bob. But yeah, if the Pac-12 could do it over again, which unfortunately they could not, they would have gone in and at the very least become the Pac-14. That's how we all feel, Spyrus. Just no to all of this. Like I don't like all of this. On the one hand, I do because it's fascinating, right? And I get to talk about this stuff, and I'm very lucky to get to do that, and I enjoy it, and I enjoy engaging with people like who are in the comments right now. So that's fun. But as a Pac-12 football fan, I hate this. I hate the idea of the Pac-12 not existing, and my beloved Ducks playing in a different conference. I don't like that, not because I don't think they could win elsewhere, but it's not what I want, right? I consume college football as a regional product first and a national product second. I enjoy it as a national product every week and every year, but I want to beat the teams out west first, and I like the regionality of it because it's special, it's distinct, and all of the aspects that make college football special and unique. It's kind of all about where you're from, right? Every team has its fans that kind of act a certain way for better or worse, or you have certain food that you have at your tailgates, or the history of the matchup with a particular team. You can't replicate that when you go into these new conferences, and you give it 10, 20 years, and you'll have that sort of history there. But reestablishing that doesn't sound as much fun as just continuing what in my mind wasn't broke before, but instead they have now attempted to fix it, and They are certainly fixing it. Can't wait for the UCLA Rutgers conference game. We'll see if they actually end up scheduling that. One thing to remember with the travel, and I agree with whoever said like UTSA, Utah State, et cetera, it doesn't sound right. I know it doesn't sound right, but none of this sounds right. Los Angeles is going to be a Big Ten city. That doesn't sound right because it's not right. But one thing to keep in mind with the travel, I agree it's a factor, and playing a November snow game is a lot different than playing in Los Angeles, but that can only happen probably about once, maybe twice, but probably once a year. You play 4 to 5 conference road games in a given season, right? In the Big Ten, I believe they play 9 conference games. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's 8. But let's say it's 9, like it is in the Pac-12 and the way it should be everywhere. That means you have either 4 road games or 5 road games. But for USC and UCLA, they're going to play each other every year. So now you're down to 3 or 4 games where you're traveling a pretty good distance, right? And even if you do go to Rutgers, maybe the conference sets it up so that USC and UCLA play Rutgers before they have a bye, right? So they can take some time to recover a little bit or from the travel, and that sort of stuff does go into how scheduling pods are formed in a given year from a conference standpoint, because each conference doesn't want to set up the schedule so that some teams look at it and go, wait a minute, why are we getting screwed here? What do you mean we have to go on the road 3 weeks in a row? We have to go to, like USC or UCLA is not going to play at Rutgers and then at Ohio State and then at Michigan in consecutive weeks. Like that's not going to happen. They're going to take all that stuff into account. They have people who sit down. I would love to be in those sorts of meetings because I would love to just throw some absolute smoke out there in any conference. Be like, give me these matchups right here. No, we can't. Yeah, BS. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I want this team. I want this team. I want it on this day. And then the next week, I want them to play this team, and I want them to play this team over here. And then you got like 4 top 20 matchups there in consecutive weeks. I'd be all about the smoke. I don't know if that would fly because of the reason that I was just mentioning, which is they're taking into account, how teams have to handle the travel and the schedule and everything. So it's a fascinating thing to follow. DJ and Tay say it's 9, so we will definitely go with that. But I think travel is something to consider, but it's not going to be a big reason. It's not the primary reason why this move could not work out from a football standpoint for the LA schools the way that they're hoping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot going on. I wanted to ask you, so I think it would be a fun little exercise for us to look into. If you, I know you said obviously we don't know what's going to happen, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen, but just starting with a couple of the schools, I feel like there's been a few schools that have been really rumored from the Pac-12 to, maybe be making some noise soon. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on a couple. So first, I just want to start with Colorado. I don't know if you've heard. I saw someone post in the chat as well that it looks there's been a lot of rumors today specifically about Colorado being all but confirmed to be headed to the Big 12. Have you seen any of that? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I have not seen any of it, so I can't confirm it. Would I be surprised by it? No. Do I have a strong reaction to it? Not really. I mean, you could find a lot of the Pac-12 is looking at that situation. If somehow they were to keep Utah but drop Colorado, that's what. Like, I'm sorry, Buffs fans, but that's what you'd call a net positive, because then you could just add San Diego State. Like, objectively speaking, the conference would be stronger if it had San Diego State than Colorado. Colorado has had 2, count them, 2. Now, one of them was a Pac-12 championship game appearance. To their credit, they've had 2 winning seasons since they joined the Pac-12 with Utah back in 2011. Like, if just Colorado left and Utah stayed, I don't know if I would have to, throw up a fake like, oh no, can't believe. Like, I don't hold any personal animus here towards Colorado. I sound like a little bit of a tool in being this way, but I'm just looking at it from a conference pedigree standpoint. It would not be a major loss if Colorado left on their own to go to the Big 12. Like, okay, fine.
Well, and you know what else is crazy?
Then the Pac-10 turns around, adds San Diego State, and they might be better. Like, it's a very real thing.
Well, so I saw it. The other thing I saw was that Colorado, and the other one they were talking about was Arizona. They were like, those are the 2 schools the Big 12.
I've heard rumblings about Arizona, ASU
makes
less
sense
so.
For basketball.
Yes, it does, and it's always tough to look beyond football, but there are considerations beyond football there to be sure. But football is, of course, the number one factor in all of this. I have not heard the Colorado as much. Arizona, I have. That has popped up on my news feed, shall we say, or in conversations that I've had with people, is that Arizona is strongly considering just saying, now we're going to go over to the Big 12. And it's kind of the same, like that's a big basketball. That's a huge basketball loss. Football
Yeah.
wise, again, not a big loss because of where they've been for the past decade or so. And, they haven't really ever been at a high level. Like, they're capable of being good, but they haven't been amazing or anything of the sort consistently. So I'd say that's more of a basketball loss, and a significant one. No doubt about that. That is a top tier program, and Tommy Lloyd appears to have a good head on his shoulders as a head coach, and had a great season this year. I mean, that was a Final Four talented team that the Wildcats had. They just ran into a Houston team with a great head coach in Kelvin Sampson, who also had a really, really good roster.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, dude. You think about it, like you said, like we lose Colorado. Well, like, is that a bad thing? Not that it's inherently a good thing, but it's not inherently bad either. And
It
it's
would
like,
it would be bad from the standpoint that it would contribute to the narrative that the
yeah,
Pac-12 is dying in a significant way. If Colorado announced they're leaving in a couple years to go to the Big 12, I think the ramifications outside of Colorado are bigger than within the state of Colorado itself, right? Losing the program in football or
just
basketball is
seems
not a
shaky.
huge loss. But if just the fact that another team
Mhm.
would announce that they're leaving is going to make other schools consider even more heavily, okay, is it time? Do we really just need to pull the trigger here and jump ship?
Yeah, but if you think about it, yeah, obviously the shakiness, the rocking of the ship, that could be scary and make more people want to look more into leaving the conference. But I feel like when you think about it, man, if we lost Colorado and Arizona, what that set of teams looks like now. Oregon State, Oregon, Washington State, Utah, Miss Arizona State. Who's the last one? Stanford.
Stanford.
Stanford and Cal. But think about that set of teams. That's a nice set of teams there. And you can build on top
Yeah,
of
it's
that with other
doable.
teams. That'd
Yeah,
be
yeah, it
not
is.
bad.
And I think you'd be losing a lot more with Colorado, Arizona, USC, UCLA. If those four were all gone, and obviously the two LA schools already are, you'd be losing a ton on the basketball court. I mean, that is a lot, because Arizona's really good. Colorado's at least been respectable, but it's not a major loss there. But if you then lost the other schools, I'm sorry, I just blanked. Who are we just saying would? With the LA schools. Sorry, those are the other
Yeah,
two. The LA schools have been perennial tournament teams.
yeah,
UCLA's kind of been carrying the conference while Arizona was figuring it out after the departure of Sean Miller. So it would be a very weak basketball conference. It would be a weaker conference in basketball than in football if you had those four leave. I think that is, and the LA schools are obviously already gone, and that's a big, big loss from a basketball standpoint.
no, absolutely. And as you guys come into the video, please do make sure you like it. I think this might be the most viewers we've ever had, so people must be excited to see you, Spencer. So
Hey, well,
please,
that's good. That's good to hear. Good to hear. I'm not hated yet.
there you go. Yeah, please like the video, guys. And if you guys love Pac-12 football and love the Utes, subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure you guys subscribe and reach out to Spencer at Locked On Pac-12, and it's Smalls_55. Correct?
That is the Twitter handle that I use. Indeed.
All right, awesome. Well, on that note, guys, it's been real tonight. Spencer, thank you so much for your time. Seriously, guys, give the guy a follow. This is so awesome, Spencer. You're welcome on anytime, man. Reach out if you ever want to come back on. And I hope you guys have a good night, and we'll see how this conference realignment goes. And go Utes. See you guys
See you,
later.
everybody.